Hello, friends. This is Confessions with Amy. Here we share new confessions every day.
Betrayal is a quiet poison. It doesn't roar or announce itself. It seeps in through the smallest crack and spreads until everything you believed in is stained beyond recognition. I never expected it to come wrapped in a name. We were in the middle of another fight, the kind that creeps up slowly and then explodes without warning. The air in our small Brooklyn apartment was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin crawl and your chest tighten. He was pacing, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to make a point. I was sitting on the edge of the couch, gripping the cushion like it was my last lifeline. Then he snapped. "You never listened to me, Lena." His voice was sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. For a moment, the word hung in the air. I blinked, my mind scrambling to catch up. Lena? That wasn't me. That was the name of his ex. The woman he told me was just a chapter in his life. The woman whose memory he swore was gone. And yet here he was, calling me by her name, as if I was nothing more than a placeholder. My heart slammed against my ribs, each beat louder than the last. "What did you just say?" I managed, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't even look at me. "Lena, you're so stubborn, just like her." The room spun. I wanted to laugh, bitterly, cruelly, but all I could do was stare numb. How long had he been thinking of her when he looked at me? How many times had I been living in the shadow of a ghost? I wanted to ask him how long he'd been calling me that name in his head, how long he'd been comparing me to someone who wasn't here. But the words caught in my throat. I felt invisible, erased. For a moment, everything we had built, the late-night talks, the dreams we shared, the plans we made, turned into dust in my hands. He finally noticed my silence and turned to face me, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What's wrong? You're not even listening." But I was already somewhere else, trapped in a storm of disbelief and heartbreak. He grabbed his jacket, muttering something about needing to clear his head, and left. No apology, no explanation, just the cold click of the door behind him. I sat there for hours, the silence pressing down on me. I could have called him, begged him to stay, demanded answers. But something inside me had shifted. The part that believed in us was gone, buried beneath the weight of that careless word. By dawn, I was packing a bag. Not to come back. Not to explain. Just to leave. I wanted to disappear before the pain swallowed me whole. As I slipped out of our apartment, I didn't look back. Because sometimes the only way to keep your dignity is to walk away without a word. When I closed the door behind me that morning, it wasn't just the physical act of leaving. It was the moment I decided to reclaim myself. Evelyn was no longer just a wife caught in the crossfire of someone else's past. I was a woman who refused to be forgotten, erased, or replaced. I didn't call him. I didn't text. I didn't send a single message. Because sometimes silence is the loudest statement you can make. The air outside felt different, sharp with the promise of something unknown. The Brooklyn streets buzzed with early commuters, but I barely noticed. My mind was a whirlwind, replaying the scene over and over, his voice, the name Lena, the emptiness in his eyes when he left. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a crack in the foundation. I rented a small studio in Queens that afternoon, a place far enough to feel free but close enough to keep my job at the digital marketing firm. The apartment was modest, nothing like the spacious loft I'd shared with him, but it was mine. Every empty wall, every bare floorboard whispered a new beginning. That night, I sat on the floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes and old memories. I pulled out a framed photo from our first anniversary, him smiling, his hand in mine. My throat tightened. How had everything turned so cold? I realized something then. I wasn't just angry at him. I was mourning the Evelyn who believed in forever, who trusted that love could conquer all. That girl had to die so I could live again. I opened my laptop and started drafting the divorce papers. It felt surreal typing his name alongside mine with the word dissolution. A finality I wasn't ready for, but knew was necessary. The hardest part wasn't the paperwork or the logistics. It was knowing that the man I thought I loved had moved on, or at least, that his heart still whispered for someone else. The next weeks blurred into a strange routine of work, therapy sessions, and quiet nights alone. Friends reached out, but I kept them at arm's length. This was my battle, my healing. I needed to find Evelyn again, beneath the rubble. Sometimes, when the loneliness crept in, I'd catch myself reaching for the phone, to call him, to ask why, but I stopped. Because I deserved answers that only time and self-love could give me. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was starting to live. The days after I left felt like walking through a fog. I was physically there, at work, at therapy, at small gatherings with friends, but my mind was somewhere else, caught between what was and what could be. I remember one afternoon in that tiny Queens apartment, sitting on the windowsill, watching the city pulse beneath me. The skyline looked the same as always, indifferent to my pain. People rushed past, lives carrying on, but I felt frozen, like the whole world had moved forward and left me behind. At work, I buried myself in projects. My job at the digital marketing firm used to be just a paycheck, something to fill my time. Now it became my anchor. Every campaign I launched, every client call, was a step toward reclaiming control. But the hardest moments were the nights. When the apartment fell silent and shadows grew long, memories would flood in. The way his smile used to make my heart skip. The promises whispered in the dark. And, of course, that name, Lena, etched into my mind like a scar. One evening, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Moments of laughter, joy, hope. The Evelyn in those pictures seemed like a stranger. How did I let myself forget who I was? That night, I wrote a letter, not to him, but to myself. I poured out the anger, the sadness, the confusion. I wrote about the betrayal, the loneliness, but also about the strength I was starting to find. I didn't send it. I didn't need to. It was for me, a promise that no matter what, I would rise. I started running again, something I hadn't done since college. The pounding of my feet against the pavement became a rhythm, a meditation. Each mile burned away a little more of the pain. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Evelyn started to reappear, not as a shadow of who she was, but as someone new. Someone who refused to be defined by a careless word. One day, I caught my reflection in a store window. The woman looking back had tired eyes, but a spark I hadn't seen in months. That spark was hope. It's funny how your past doesn't just stay behind you. It follows you around, like a shadow that refuses to fade. After weeks of solitude and self-discovery, I thought I was ready to step back into the world, ready to open the door to someone new. I met Alex at a charity gala in Manhattan. He was nothing like my ex, calm, thoughtful, with a kind smile that didn't carry hidden meanings. We talked about books, travel, the little things that make life worth living. For the first time in months, I felt something stir inside me, cautious but real. But even as we laughed and shared stories, the ghost of that name, Lena, lingered in the corners of my mind. Every time Alex reached for my hand, I flinched. Every time he smiled, I wondered if I was setting myself up for disappointment. I spent nights wrestling with myself. Could I trust again? Could I allow someone new in without the weight of my past crushing us both? One evening, after a date, I sat in my apartment and stared at the ceiling. The silence was heavy. I whispered to myself, I'm not her. I'm Evelyn. And I deserve more. Slowly, I began to confront my fears. Therapy helped, not just talking about what happened, but learning to love myself again, to set boundaries, to believe in my own worth. Alex was patient. He never pushed. He understood that healing isn't a straight line. We started spending more time together. Quiet dinners, walks in Prospect Park, late-night talks about everything and nothing. But even as my heart softened, I knew I wasn't fully free. The name Lena still echoed somewhere deep inside. It was a scar, yes, but also a reminder that I survived. And survival, I realized, was just the beginning. Trust is a fragile thing. After what happened, I never thought I'd be able to hand it over to someone else again. It felt like giving away a piece of myself that might never come back. With Alex, everything was different, slow, gentle, patient. He didn't rush me or demand explanations. But I caught myself hesitating every time he asked something personal, every time he reached out. One afternoon, we met at a quiet cafe in Williamsburg. The sunlight filtered through the windows, casting soft patterns on the wooden tables. Alex smiled, waiting for me to say something, but I was lost in thought. "I know this isn't easy," he said quietly. "Take your time. I'm here." I looked at him, the sincerity in his eyes breaking down walls I thought were permanent. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Scared that I'll always be the girl who was replaced. Scared that one day you'll say my name wrong too." He reached across the table and took my hand. "You're not her, and I'm not him. What we have is ours to build." Those words became my mantra. Slowly, I began to open up, sharing pieces of my past, my fears, my hopes. And with each story, the weight on my chest grew lighter. At night, when I lay in bed, I no longer felt that tight knot of anxiety. Instead, there was a quiet calm, the kind that only comes when you start to believe in something new. But rebuilding trust wasn't just about Alex. It was about trusting myself, my choices, my instincts, my worth. I started setting boundaries I never dared before, saying no to things that drained me, choosing people and situations that lifted me up. It wasn't easy. There were days when the memories threatened to pull me back into the darkness. But I fought them off, reminding myself how far I'd come. One evening, as we walked along the East River, the city lights shimmering on the water, I realized something. I was no longer just surviving. I was beginning to live again, fully, fearlessly, on my own terms. For years, I had silenced myself, swallowed my opinions, hidden my dreams, just to keep the peace. But now, after everything, I was determined to find my own voice again. It started small. I signed up for a public speaking workshop in downtown Manhattan, something I'd always wanted to do but never dared. The first class terrified me. My hands shook, my voice cracked, and every word felt like it was being judged. But I kept going. Each week, I pushed a little harder. I practiced speaking up at work, sharing ideas I'd kept hidden. I even spoke honestly with Alex about what I wanted and needed. One night, after a long day, I sat at my kitchen table writing a personal essay about my journey, betrayal, heartbreak, and ultimately, rediscovery. Putting my pain and strength into words felt like therapy. The essay was raw and honest. I posted it on a popular storytelling platform under a pseudonym. The response surprised me. Messages from strangers who had walked similar paths, who found hope in my story. That feedback ignited something inside me. Maybe my voice could help others. Maybe I could turn my pain into power. At work, I pitched a new project to create authentic, personal storytelling campaigns for clients. It was risky, but the team loved it. The project launched successfully, and for the first time, I felt like my work truly mattered. Alex cheered me on, proud but never overbearing. We grew together, two people learning how to love and respect each other's growth. One evening, as we watched the sunset from my rooftop, I realized something profound. I wasn't just Evelyn the survivor anymore. I was Evelyn the creator, the storyteller, the woman reclaiming her life one word at a time. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Just when I thought I had stitched myself back together, life threw a curveball I didn't see coming. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was at a coffee shop in Williamsburg, reviewing notes for an upcoming presentation, when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Reluctantly, I answered. "Evelyn? It's Lena." My heart skipped, then plunged. Hearing her voice, the woman whose name had haunted me, was like stepping into a storm. She didn't sound angry or triumphant, just tired. "I wanted to talk," she said softly. "About everything." For a moment, I considered hanging up. But something in her tone stirred curiosity, maybe even a flicker of closure I desperately needed. We agreed to meet at a quiet diner the next day. Sitting across from her, I studied the woman who had been my shadow for so long. Lena wasn't the villain I'd imagined. She was human, flawed, broken, perhaps even sorry. She told me things I hadn't known. How their relationship ended not with hatred but confusion. How she never intended to hurt me. How she moved away, trying to escape the past. I listened, guarded but open. The conversation wasn't catharsis, but it was a step, a way to reclaim my story on my own terms. That night, I wrote again, pouring the unexpected encounter onto the page. Forgiveness wasn't easy. Maybe it wasn't even necessary yet. But releasing the anger, even a little, was healing. Alex held me afterward, steady and silent. Sometimes words aren't needed when someone just shows up. The past had come knocking, but I was no longer afraid to answer. After meeting Lena, something inside me shifted. The weight I'd carried for so long, bitterness, jealousy, the ache of betrayal, began to feel a little lighter. Not gone, but manageable. With Alex, things deepened in ways I hadn't dared to imagine before. He wasn't just a comfort. He was becoming a partner in every sense. One Saturday morning, we went to a small jazz club in Harlem. The room was dim, smoky, the music slow and soulful. I leaned into him, feeling safe for the first time in ages. "I want you to meet my family," I said quietly. Alex smiled, surprised but honored. Introducing him to my younger sister and parents was nerve-wracking. Would they like him? Would I stumble over my words? But as the evening unfolded, laughter filled the room, and the knot of anxiety inside me loosened. It wasn't just about meeting new people. It was about letting someone in, letting him see all of me, scars and all. At work, I started mentoring a young woman named Jade who reminded me of the Evelyn I used to be, unsure, holding back. Watching her grow gave me a sense of purpose beyond myself. Balancing all these parts, the past, the present, the future, wasn't easy. There were days when old doubts crept in, when the ghost of that name flickered at the edges of my mind. But instead of building walls, I chose to build bridges, connections based on honesty, vulnerability, and respect. One evening, as Alex and I sat on my rooftop, the city lights sparkling below us, he took my hand. "Thank you for trusting me," he said softly. I smiled, squeezing his hand back. "I'm still learning. But with you, I'm not afraid anymore." For the first time, I believed that love wasn't about perfection or forgetting the past. It was about choosing each other, flaws, fears, and all, every single day. The hardest battles are the ones fought inside. Months had passed since that rainy day when Lena called. Since then, my life had started to feel like my own again. But the scars still tangled beneath the surface, reminders that healing isn't linear. One evening, I was working late at the firm, preparing for a big client pitch. Suddenly, a message popped up on my phone, from my ex. At first, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to delete it without a glance. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, made me open it. "Evelyn, I've made mistakes. I'm sorry for everything." The words felt like a slap and a whisper at the same time. I sat back, heart pounding. For a moment, old anger flared, threatening to consume me. But then something inside shifted, a calm, steady voice I hadn't heard in a long time. I typed back slowly, deliberately. "I am not who I was. I'm not waiting for apologies or regrets. I'm building a life that doesn't need your shadows." Hitting send felt like breaking free from chains I hadn't realized bound me. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. The past was a chapter, not the whole story. Later that night, Alex held me close as I cried. Not from pain, but relief. From loss, yes, but also from newfound strength. In that moment, I knew I was unbreakable. No careless word, no forgotten name, could define me anymore. Spring had arrived in New York, painting the city with fresh colors and new energy. I stood on my rooftop, the breeze warm and soft, watching the sun dip below the skyline. It felt like a metaphor, the end of one day and the promise of another. My life was no longer defined by shadows or ghosts. I was Evelyn, whole, strong, and unapologetically me. Alex was by my side, not as a cure or a replacement, but as a true partner. We dreamed together, planned together, and faced challenges hand in hand. Our love wasn't perfect. No love is, but it was real. I had grown in ways I never thought possible. My work flourished. My voice reached people who needed to hear it. I was mentoring, creating, living on my own terms. One evening, after a successful presentation, Alex surprised me with a small dinner on the rooftop. Candles flickered, the city lights sparkling below us. He looked into my eyes and said, "Evelyn, you're incredible. You've been through so much and came out shining." I smiled, feeling tears of joy. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. We toasted to new beginnings, to healing, to love that lifts rather than breaks. Looking back, that careless name, Lena, had been a painful wound. But it also became the spark that ignited my transformation. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a woman who reclaimed her story, her power, and her happiness. And this was only the beginning.